Now moving into the upper body, guys, let's take a look at step number one, and that would be something small. I'll refer to that as the flare that you use to start this pose. Alright, so if you take a look at some of these videos, you'll see the guys will make one small movement, whether it be crossing the arms in almost an X-shaped way down in front of them before going into the double bicep pose. Maybe you have a different transition that you'd like to use where you pull down from the top. A lot of guys do this from the back. Alright, this is going to be referred to as the flare that we use to start off the pose. And that's the first thing we'll be talking about. So this is very simple, guys. You're allowed to do pretty much whatever you feel comfortable doing. A lot of times you'll just go straight into the pose, but once you get more confident, feel free to add a little bit more flair, a little bit more gusto to this with your arm movements. A lot of times it'll attract attention to you, and it also exudes confidence in general. So we do have to be careful. We don't want to take forever getting into the pose. So do not take 5-6 seconds doing some kind of flare movement just to get into the pose. Hit it quick and then finish the pose. So moving on from there, let's look at getting your arms into position, right? And we'll go straight into the angles that I always speak of when I talk about the front double bicep pose, as well as the back double bicep pose. I always suggest that people start off making right angles or 90-degree angles with their arms and adjusting from there. Rarely will I ever see anybody look good in an obtuse angle past 90 degrees. In fact, I've never seen it. So that's something we usually stay away from. We'll start with 90 and then we can bring them in just a little bit if you feel like that's going to help. Now the main reason I start with 90 is this. Take a look in the mirror when you're doing a front double bicep and the actual size or the appearance of the size of your bicep muscle at 90 degrees. Obviously, as you shorten that angle and make it more acute, the bicep contracts. Well, that also loses some of the volume and surface area of the bicep because you are contracting it. So yes, it might help with the peak, but it also may hurt you in that you're going to lose some of the surface area and volume and the overall appearance of having a big arm. So I always start with 90. Moving on from there, you can shorten the angle slightly, even try 60. I would not normally go much past that because once you start going too close and the angle becomes too acute, we start actually having to manipulate our shoulder joint with movement in the humerus bone itself. That's going to cause the arm to raise up more, and it usually doesn't look nearly as good. Now that leads me into the next point I want to point out, which is 180-degree straight line from the shoulders out through the humerus. If you're looking at your arms, I want to make generally a 180-degree straight line from elbow to elbow with my shoulder joints. This is the angle I'm talking about that gets manipulated when you start turning that angle of your arms into an acute angle by contracting the biceps too much. This is something to watch out for because it will change the appearance of the pose. So now we have some angles to think about. We have the 180-degree straight line between my elbow joints and my shoulder joints. And then I have the 90-degree angle that I start with when it comes to the angle at my elbow joint with my forearms and the muscles around the humerus. Now, going from there, let's talk about the hand position, because a supinated or pronated hand position is going to change the appearance as well of how the biceps and the forearms look. Now, anatomically speaking, the more supinated you are, the more your bicep is going to be contracted and peaked in its appearance. So take a look in the mirror, guys. Supinate your hand. I always tell people to think about holding a bowl of soup to remember a supinated hand position as opposed to prone being the overhand. So take a look at the difference in your musculature when you go supine and then when you pronate your hand out. This is going to play a big part. Now obviously you will not see somebody do a over pronated hand position in a front double bicep pose. It's going to look silly. But there is a middle ground where you might not want to be completely supinated. You might want to be slightly in the middle somewhere. It might help with the appearance of your bicep. So this is going to be something that comes down to your own personal judgment. You're going to have to practice. You're going to have to figure out what looks best in terms of how supinated your hand position is. And to finish off the pose, let's just go ahead and clasp our thumbs in our hands. Alright, this is going to help us prevent any further distractions with our hands, and give us the opportunity to just focus on what needs to be focused on during this pose. So there we have it, some of the most important things to be thinking about when you're manipulating your upper body during the front double biceps pose. Now remember, this is a second cue. Now we're going to move on to the third cue, which is our midsection adjustments.